Welcome, Exiles. Today I want to talk about Ephemeral Edge and why it can be nutty. I've been doing some theory crafting. This is one of my favorite things to do when we get teasers like this is craft around the new items. What can we do with them? And one of the ones I've found to be quite good is Ephemeral Edge. This sword in particular looks a lot like Energy Blade, but there's some key differences. Number one is Energy Blade cuts your energy shield in half, so you stack into defenses just to lose half your EHP. It feels bad, but it comes with good attack speed and good crit, and you can use it with Battle Mage. Whereas Ephemeral Edge, it doesn't work with Battle Mage as far as I know based on the wording, and it has terrible attack speed. This means, like, inherently there's some bad things. Now, we can do stuff to work around that. Number one, we can work around attack speed by going something like Blade Trap. This is a skill that doesn't care about the attack speed, and it still has good damage. At that point, all that's left is crit, and crit is one of the easier problems to fix, especially with something like traps, especially when you include something like Assassin's Mark. You can start to fix crit pretty easily, and all of a sudden, Ephemeral Edge becomes a scaling mechanic like Energy Blade without the downside of losing half your energy shield. And this gets even crazier when you look at Ephemeral Edge Blade Trap considered in combination with something like Sunblast, a unique that basically says you deal 300% more damage with trap skills. And that's a little bit nutty. It's a little bit crazy. It has the downside of you now have to wait for the trap to explode. It's going to be like a 1 second duration if you have this max rolled. It's going to have a little bit of feels good, but the amount of power, the amount of damage you're getting from this is just crazy. So I think it's going to justify it. It's going to basically be one of those uniques where it's like, okay, do I want a little bit of feels bad, but a whole lot of power? Sunblast is a go-to for trap builds. Now, on top of that, it also has an issue of traps cannot be triggered by enemies, which means you can't generate charges via something like charged traps. It's a little bit awkward, but I'm going to show you how we can work around something like that as a Trickster Ephemeral Blade Trapper. Blech. That's a mouthful. Anyways, let's get into it. Why do I think this is so good? Well, to start off with, I have a theory crafted character right now which has no awakened gems, nothing level 21. It only has a few skill setups. It's dealing 17 million damage, and it's only with a few X of gear, like cheap basic gear. It's all contingent on, is Ephemeral Edge going to be a rare drop? Well, it's currently not a very rare drop, and it's currently garbage tier, no one cares about it, so maybe it'll be cheap as well, which could make this build extremely strong as a bosser early on in the league. Because we have 17 million damage, we have close to evade cap. If we get something like we proc our Jade Flask, for example, we go up to 86, and then if you have 86, plus we have an enemy hit us with an attack, our evade chance will go up to like 94%. And then they have to hit us once in the next 4 seconds, or we go back to taking 20% less attack damage. So there's some combinations we can work out there. Not to mention, there's other things that are nice about this character, like having spell suppress cap, along with 10k energy shield, and the fact if we get hit with a spell, we have a 50% chance to proc recharge, which will be, I don't know, about 3 to 4,000 per second. It has some very nice defensive layers on top of being a build that deals 20 million damage. We'll go over the gear pieces. It's basically, we're looking at gear pieces where I had something like T1, T2 energy shields along with like a res roll and a crafted res. Or with our Sadist Garb, for example, it's a bunch of T2, T3 rolls with a cold res roll, and I just crafted on strength, which... do I even need that strength? I'm not sure if I do or not, to be honest. I might have needed it for something. Frankly, you probably could get around this with other methods and have just a crafted res roll or something like that. Then we look at our rings, for example. I just did the same ring for every single thing, which has ES, WED, and percent energy shield and all res. Now, simply put, if we just get rid of the increased energy shield, which is the only thing that's hard to get on this ring, I would say we lose 400 ES. That's perfectly doable. Both these rings are the rings I'm talking about. And this is 3 stat rings where you're bench crafting on minimum charge. I didn't even bless orb the percent elemental damage, and I didn't even catalyst this. And it'd be fairly easily to put turbulent catalyst and deal more damage, etc., which could make up for the ES loss in the terms of percent damage. Because we don't have a lot of percent damage, and whenever we get it, it's a big boost with the current setup. So that'd be perfectly fine. Other things we have on this character is we have... Sword Gloves. This is maybe our best item on the character, which is like T1 flat ES, a T2 hybrid, which you could probably lower this like, I don't know, garbage, whatever, and that's not going to lose us much ES, lose us like 50 ES, that's fine. And then just a couple bad res rolls and just okay int. I'm not getting gear here that's OP. You look at our skill setups, all we have is Blade Trap with level 20 gems, everything you can get from a vendor. And then the count here I have set to 12 because we are using a Blade Trap enchant for +1 rotation and a dual wield for +1 rotation. So by default, Blade Trap has 4 rotations. You add +2 for the enchant, +1 for dual wielding, and Blade Trap, each rotation hits twice, and that's why we get the 12 count here. And then when we throw a trap, we throw 4 instead of 1 because of Sunblast. So what we're having here is we're having 12 hits per trap thrown, and each time we throw a trap, we throw 4. So in the configuration file, I put in 300% more trap throw speed. That's to simulate the DPS number based on throwing 4 traps instead of 1. That's all that is. And the other numbers I have in here is Polymath. We have 10 masteries, +2 maximum frenzy charge. That's just for the Trickster ascendancy point that gives charges. And then the other like base stats, 17% more damage is to simulate the coal strike we have from our Eternal Struggle. Stuff like that is all just simulating what the DPS will be with this sort of gear. Now, the idea I have planning for this character to deal with charges is I am planning to use the new Grand Spectrum duels. They showcased a +1 minimum endurance charge duel, and I'm just assuming that means there's going to be a +1 minimum frenzy or a +1 minimum power if you want to go for those. And all we're really going to do is we're going to grab something like a +1. I simulate this by having some crit chance ones in here. These crit chance ones aren't necessary for us to cap crit. We have 95%, and then our Diamond Flask takes us well over. And Diamond Flask you can get pretty good uptime on, but this is just to simulate the percent damage, because I was thinking, just throw in a percent LE damage one, throw in a frenzy charge one, and then throw in a endurance charge one. And then what I was going to do, which is really simple and I think wouldn't be too bad in terms of quality of life, is just get a shield in our offhand where you awaken orb +2 minimum power and +2 minimum frenzy. And simply put, whenever we'd want to get our maximum frenzies, we just do a real quick weapon swap. I would bind it to like something like the mouse button right here. So just click it, and it's an uptime of about 30+ seconds because of how much frenzy charge duration you get from the Swift Killer node. And it means we're going to have 7 frenzy charges between the two maximum here and the 2 minimum on our rings. So you get +3 minimum from the jewel, +2 minimum from the 2 rings, and then +2 from shield swap real quick, have a 30-second duration on those charges. And I think that's a relatively reasonable way to have 7 max and frenzy charges on at most of the time. That's how we get the charges. That's how we get around the downside of Sunblast. I wonder if there's anything else I should say about this build. This character has... its weak spot is physical damage. I'm going to plan on having my items here where I would craft on percent fizz taken as on the implicit of this helmet. You could also fit in a percent fizz taken as for a third prefix. Stuff like that starts to make the fizz hit hurt a hell of a lot less. And then on top of that, I don't think it's even going to be an issue. This is conceptually something I've tried out before with Tricksters, and it's worked quite well for me every time, is you don't need armor with Trickster. Simply you get evade cap, you get a decent energy shield pool, and you get spell suppress. That means our fizz hits get basically reduced by spell suppress, making them not too much of an issue. And then on top of that, if you get hit by an attack, you only get hit by an attack once out of every 20 attacks, because you're getting an evade cap pretty much. Well, for this character specifically, we need, and for this is going to be for the most cases what I'm going to recommend, is get a Watcher's Eye with the evade flat chance. That's going to take it evade chance to about 88, 87. And then Wind Dancer with the new change will give you 10% more evade chance. So you'll go from 87 or 88 straight to 95 based on how that mechanic works now. And the enemies have to hit you once or over once, more than once in 4 seconds, and you're evading 19 out of 20 attacks. And I just can't see a scenario where this is really going to be that rough. I think the only scenario I can think of is maybe Simulacrum, if you're just standing still sort of situation. But that's the character I thought out in my head, and I theory crafted. I theory crafted some others that just weren't quite as good. This one was just over the top, disgusting for the level of gear investment. The fact I didn't even bother to set up more skill setups. You can probably juice the DPS more, cheese it more by adding in more skill setups, more quality of life, stuff like that. You can even cheese the EHP pool by adding stuff like Frost Shield, and it's just going to be strong, I think. The only quality of life issue you're looking at is Sunblast for the delay in the trap trigger, and I think you might need to get AoE on this build. I think that's the only thing it's really lacking, and there's room for you to put that in there in terms of how weak this gear is, and in terms of the fact this is just a level 95 Trickster. And you probably can afford to drop damage, you can probably afford to drop a little ES, stuff like that, and trade it for area of effect. So, that's the character I've thought out. I think this is a fun thing to do, is look at all the uniques, see what you can come up with, and I'm personally excited about the new League Start, and to celebrate League Start POVs and theory crafting cool builds. Today on stream, I'm going to be reviewing and ranking viewer builds, so if you have something cool you're excited about, you want to share, feel free to stop by the stream and say, hey, check out my POV. I'm going to be going through them and ranking them based on some cool interactions people come up with, see what the community has to offer in terms of interesting builds they've come up for their League starters. So this is not the League starter I'm going to do. It's just something I think is quite strong, and I'll probably make as maybe a third or fourth character. But it's just something where I'm like, man, Ephemeral Edge has got some cool potential, and then mixing it in with the new Trickster, it can kind of pop off. I could also see this being good with something like a more traditional setup for a Energy Blade build with Inquisitor without going Battle Mage, but instead going Blade Trap sort of situation. So anyways, that's the video. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care.